Yeah, and chances are is that Vicente Fernandez probably didn't remember that concert either because he also likes to drink while he sings.
And by the way, a good DJ knows that that's the exact time when you bring out Vicente Fernandez. You don't bring out Vicente Fernandez earlier in the night because the people are not ready for him. Vicente Fernandez and Ramon Ayala are what I consider the closers of parties, the Mariano Riveras of the Mexican parties, because these guys are the heavy hitters. You know, you play them too early and you go and you mess up somebody's night.
Y acá entre nos, quiero que sepas la verdad.
Ooh,
Aquí estoy con el reo,
you're
que está
gonna
triste.
you're gonna make me want to drink some shots of tequila.
Yes. For those who may not know Vicente Fernandez, or for those of you who do know, you know what kind of giant Vicente Fernandez is. He's probably the last surviving Mexican, Latin American great singers from la época de oro del cine mexicano. And he is 81 years old, and it sounds like unfortunately he had an accident at home where he fell and he seriously injured himself.
And for those that don't know who he is, the Mexicans that are doing construction work around your house or landscaping, if they have any music on, chances are they are listening to this man. That's who they are listening to. Most of the country has heard Vicente Fernandez before, directly or indirectly.
Yeah, and and one of the reasons again why he became such a prominent voice in Latin America was again because of El Cine de Oro from Mexico. I mean, the movies. I know La Ley del Monte in Colombia was a hit, and so many other movies that he was on.
But
Obviously, the concerts, the horse shows that he and others put together, all of those elements made him and made him an
but
icon of Latin American music. And I know that some of the best times in a party, particularly those times at the end of the party when only the hardcore borrachos are sticking around, somebody's playing a guitar, and somebody brings out the tequila bottle, you know that chances are that you're singing El Rey, La Ley del Monte, Acá entre nos, so many other classic songs that he brought to this world.
you know, when people normally talk about the golden era of Mexican cinema, I think they're usually referring to the Pedro Infante, Jorge Negrete, those movies in black and white from the 50s and 60s. He
Okay.
didn't really start making films till he was in the 70s. So I think he caught the tail end of that era. Because most of
Okay.
his movies are in color. But definitely there's still movies that I grew up with that most Mexicans from my generation and the older generation are familiar with. I think they also were exported to Latin America. So yeah, I think technically, yeah, that's right. I usually associate the golden era again with the older movies, but it's a huge influence. I mean, this man has been doing this for 5 decades now. When I was born, he was already at it, and here we are, and he'll still at it. And I hope sometimes I think like, man, what's gonna happen when he's no longer with us? And that's why when he has these type of scares like this, you gotta call your aunt, you gotta call your mom, you gotta call everyone to see make sure they're doing okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of I know I've seen a lot of praying memes on Twitter and Instagram. So a lot of people are sending healthy vibes and good wishes to him and his family.
Yeah, definitely. I have I have so many memories associated with him, with the music, with the movies. When I was a kid, I think I was talking to you about this earlier. When I was a kid, La Ley del Monte was a movie that I really wanted to watch because that's when it had come out, and usually it would take a year or two for those movies to play on TV. But I was really young, so I could never make it through movies. I could never stay up beyond like the first 15 minutes because the movies would start around 9 and I was already knocked out by 9:15 or 9:20. So I remember just being so mad that I could not finish watching that movie. And I think they played it 2 or 3 times, and every single time I'd watch the first 15 minutes and then wake up the next day just really pissed off that I couldn't make it through the night.
You were like, "Grabé la penca del maguey." tu nombre.
Sorry, but let's get back to Gente because I think I got a little bit off topic here. But the good news is that he is stable. They said that it was a pretty serious injury, and they do have him on a ventilator, and he's receiving critical patient care. He's pretty old. He's 81, so anytime you're that age, any of these injuries could it gets magnified just because of the age. So, fortunately, he's I think he's going to be able to pull through. It's hard to say. I think I don't even know if he's still doing concerts. Fortunately, I did get a chance to see him twice. I got to see him once in New York, Madison Square Garden, and then I got to
Wow.
see him here. I got to see him here in LA as well,
Mm.
and it was a great time. But typical being young and stupid, we drank too much at the pre-party, and I think I don't remember half of the concert both times. But I
Damn.
think I think that's if you're gonna experience Vicente Fernandez, that's I think that's the way to do it at least.
Yeah, and chances are is that Vicente Fernandez probably didn't remember that concert either because he also likes to drink while he sings, which is part of the reason that I think that when you think about it, I mean, 81, yes, is old, but relatively young. But I also think that the type of lifestyle that he's had, I know he certainly slowed down not too long ago, but when you think about concerts, drinking, traveling, all the fun that he had, I know that he certainly se la gozó, Don
but
Chente.
but also if you consider that he's been famous for 5 decades, and
Yeah,
considering that he's like a rock star in Mexico and has been since the beginning, I mean he's pretty conservative compared to other artists with that type of profile. Like any other artist would have burned out by now. So that tells you that he actually probably takes pretty good care of himself. Because he would not have made it to 81 if the lifestyle that you see on stage is the lifestyle that he led outside of stage.
that's
There,
true. That's a good point. So he probably did that in his younger years, and then he ya sentó cabeza.
yeah, I mean, he's doing something right. It can't just be good genes because even if you have good genes, a life of partying and rock and roll and bad diet and not taking good care of yourself, then that's gonna catch up with you by the time you're 80. And obviously, I don't think just because culturally being Mexican and being from an older generation, he probably wasn't doing the drugs the same way that American rock stars would. But I wouldn't be surprised if every now and then he didn't do a few lines of coke and other things. I mean, a lot of artists. I mean, Ramon Ayala has been known to do that. So, look, I'm not saying that he would, but I wouldn't be surprised, and obviously I wouldn't blame him. He should have tried that a few times. He definitely has the resources, and especially if he tried it at a later age, why not?
Yeah, well, maybe, and if he didn't do it, probably Alejandro Fernandez did.
Yeah, that's true. The first thing that came to my mind when I heard about this was I thought that he had fallen from a horse because I always picture him like that. I'm like, oh, he probably fell
Mm.
from one of his horses. Damn it! Tell him to not not ride his horses so often anymore. He's not young anymore. But
Yeah, and I think if you show some of the more recent pictures, you can tell how he had gained a good amount of weight. Um, so I know that that was, I think that maybe that also contributed to the severeness of his fall.
oh
But the funny thing with Vicente Fernandez is like his hair. Look at his hair is white as white, but then his cejas and mustache
yeah,
still is dark.
it's crazy. Vicente Fernandez has always been the same age for me. He hasn't
Mm.
changed because, like I said, when I was born, he was already old. He's always been old to me, and I really haven't seen. Obviously, if I go back and look at a picture of him from a movie in the '70s, like Tu Maldito Amor or La Ley del Monte, I'm sure that I'm gonna see a huge difference. But every time I see him, he always looks the same to me. It's exactly how I remember him, older than I am.
It's funny. It seems like your notion of what's old has evolved with time as well.
Well, yeah, of course, because when I was 5 or 6 and I was seeing him, he was like 25 or something. So to me, that was old, right? Because it
Mm.
is because you're 5 and someone's 25. They're like dinosaurs to you. So to me, he's always been the same age. Anyway, so people out there, if he's still doing concerts, I don't know. Honestly, I got my concerts. I went to see him. I could say that I went to the concerts. If I don't see him anymore, then I'm fine with it. But if people out there have procrastinated, if they haven't had a chance to see him, and if you get lucky enough to go see him at a concert, or just try to make it out there, it's a one in a lifetime experience. And once we lose him, he is the last of these great Mexican singers that sing the ranchera with that deep operatic voice, like Jorge Negrete, Javier Solis, Pedro Infante, and yeah, just one of a kind. We won't have anyone else like him afterwards.
That's very true. And I think I guess it would be also good to point out that obviously he did represent a very different era and a very different, I mean, in some ways he represented the ultimate machismo, although there's a few songs where he, does cry and sort of show a softer side, como Mujeres Divinas, no? So like that's one of those songs that I think that also gets you, and gets so many people when you listen to it. Um, and I think, yes, definitely hoping that he recovers out of this one, but we do know that his time with us is sort of coming to an end. So I think it will be interesting to see how we may be able to, um, recognize him, appreciate him, and then ultimately when he does pass, how we as a people are gonna deal with that sad moment.
Yeah, but also as you mentioned, just for people that may not be as familiar with them, that may not be as familiar with the culture, especially the culture that he grew up in, that we grew up in. It was a very sexist culture. So now don't be surprised if that is reflected in the songs, if that's reflected in the movies. One of my friends, she was dating a guy from Puerto Rico, and they watched the movie Por tu maldito amor. They watched that movie together, and his reaction to me was like, I just saw this movie with Vicente Fernandez, and in the movie, he pretty much forced himself on a woman. He raped her, and then he made her his wife. And I was like, really? I was like, I don't remember that part from the movie. So I went back and watched it, and I was like, holy shit, yeah, that happened.
Hmm.
So, yeah, just be careful, right? To if you're gonna judge them based on today's standards, then of course you're gonna find a lot of flaws with it, uh, like you will with a lot of things that are from that era. So yeah, it's tricky. I think we a lot of us have a connection to them because it's a nostalgia. We grew up with them, and so we give them a pass. Maybe that's a little hypocritical, but I'm not going to cancel Vicente Fernandez just because all of a sudden the society has changed, and a lot of the things that he represented, that he was singing about, we don't find acceptable anymore. That's a tricky one.
Yeah, no, it is. But I think that's part of the reason why I wanted to bring it up, because he does represent, I mean, both the good and the bad. But ultimately, he is, to so many of us, he is our grandfather, right? Um, and in some ways, that he is the type of person that has always been there. His music has been there. His music, because of the feeling, because of the experiences that he communicates. And I know plenty of women in my life who love him, who love his music, who probably even feel the songs, even more to a deeper level too. Um,
And I don't
but
know
yeah,
if you,
so,
yeah.
so it's gonna be it's just, it's gonna be hard to, it's hard to see him. And I think part of the reason why so many people are so anticipating and hoping and praying is because he means a lot to many of us.
Well, it'll be the end of an era, and it'll remind a lot of us of our own mortality. That all of
Hmm.
our heroes, all of those that we look up to, that we hold high in high regard, are dying. So yeah, it's going to. I wouldn't be surprised if they make that day or his birthday a national holiday in Mexico. And I think I don't know if you've had this experience because you came from the East Coast, but I don't know if you've experienced that here. But when I moved back from New York to LA, and I went out for the first time to a club that played. At the time, they were playing like rock en español and reggaeton. Once last call, and once it was last call at 1:30 or 1:45, the DJ just switched it up. Like, and it's the end of the night, everything's winding down, and they play. All of a sudden, it switches from rock en español and reggaeton to Vicente Fernandez, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Because
Mm-hmm.
when I grew up, you wouldn't really mix those genres, right? If you listen to rancheras, then that's what you listen to, and in a way, a lot of like the kids that were listening to hip hop, that were listening to rock en español, they didn't even want to associate with you. And when I was living on the East Coast, obviously they're not gonna play any of this over there. You go to a rock en español club, they're just gonna play rock en español. You come back to LA like 10, 20 years later from how the culture was, like say in the 80s or in the 90s, where these genres didn't mix, to now all of a sudden you go to clubs and it's like, oh, I guess that's normal here. You guys just play Vicente Fernandez, even though this is a rock en español or reggaeton club. That happened multiple times, and I was like, oh, I guess that's how things are now. That's, to me, that was like pretty cool, because coming back from the East Coast, coming back to LA, I was like, oh yeah, shit, I forgot how much I love being like in this environment where I'm surrounded by people that listen to, that can go from one type of music to another so seamlessly. So yeah, that was a great
Yeah.
experience. And by the way, a good DJ knows that that's the exact time when you bring out Vicente Fernandez. You don't bring out Vicente Fernandez earlier in the night, because the people are not ready for him. Vicente Fernandez and Ramon Ayala are what I consider the closers of parties, the Mariano Riveras of the Mexican parties, because these guys are the heavy hitters. You know, you play them too early and you go and you mess up somebody's night. You say you play Tragos Amargos or Mujeres Divinas at 6 or 7 p.m. By 8 p.m., by 9 p.m., the people that are in that party are, they're not with you anymore. They've already started pounding beers and or taking shots, and chances are you're gonna have to call somebody to take them home. Call a relative, call a cousin, all right, call the son or the daughter. It's like, hey, venga por tu papá porque ya he can't go anymore. So, an experienced DJ knows that if you're working the crowd, then you start them up with cumbia, you start them up with some norteña music that is danceable, and with maybe some corridos, but still stuff that they can still enjoy the party, have a good time, and not get too carried away. So if you ever find yourself at a party and the DJ makes that rookie mistake, then kindly go up to him and say, "Hey, man, what are you doing? No, that's a big no-no. You don't play these guys. The people are not ready." It's like Zoolander's, what is it? His Magnum post. It's just people are not ready for these guys too early in the night. You say, these guys are the heavy hitters. You bring them out at the end of the night, not right now. It's too soon. It's too soon.
That's cool. Yeah, and it's funny because when I was in the East Coast, and I DJ'd at some parties, currently Vicente Fernandez and El Rey and some of the other songs were certainly a good way to kind of slow things down. And by that time, it's really the hardcore people who are still there. The problem is obviously that those songs kind of make you want to drink more and keep the party going. So that's where people have to go to the after party. But yeah, but I think that it's it's cool. It's cool that we can appreciate his music, and now that we have so many other things to enjoy.
Yep. All right, so let's wrap it up. I'm going to wrap it up with pictures of him from the 1970s, just so that we can I can see him how I remember him as a kid. So yeah, big difference now that I compare them side by side.
Yeah.
All right,
Well, he's
so
definitely he's lived a rich life, and he's living a rich legacy too.
oh yeah, definitely. Okay, if you all out there like our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective. We are on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Nos vemos.